Good morning. Life is to be related. A book by Vimala Thakar. Um, I'm going to continue the talk she gave in May 1982 that I started reading yesterday. Beautiful talk. So here we go. In profound sleep, the I is not sitting at the center. It has gone into complete abeyance, and in the complete abeyance of the ego, of the I, there is profound sleep. We don't know that we are sleeping. We're completely relaxed. Now, in sleep consciousness, the control of the I consciousness over the periphery of our lives and over the nature of our activities, over the content of life, that I has gone into abeyance. It exerts no control, no regulations, and yet life continues. Life continues, but there are no concepts, no symbols, no controller, no director, nothing at all. It's a spontaneous movement of life that goes on within. And we come back out of sleep and say, wow, what a great sleep I had. And if somebody asks, what happened in your good sleep? Then we'll say, how can I tell you? I was sleeping. I wasn't functioning. So without the functioning of the ego, it is not only possible to survive, but it's very possible to live. Life is not suspended, even for a fraction of a second, while we are sleeping. In the unconditional relaxation of the body, which is not taking in any perception, in the complete abeyance or spontaneous non-action of the mind, when there are no concepts, no symbols, and no reactions, the movement of life still persists. There is a trans-perceptual level of our being, and an area or field of our life where the mind does not function, and yet we live. There's an emptiness in the mind, no movement of thought or emotions, no pressure, no neurological tension in the body. Because movement of a thought creates tensions, and movement of emotions create pressures that are felt by the stomach, by the eyes, and by the brain. It is fun to watch and note down our observations of what happens to us when we feel angry, jealous, depressed, excited, frustrated, or ambitious. Just to watch the movement of ambition and see what it does to the vital parts of our being. Note them down, and then it becomes our own discovery and not borrowed from any books. Understanding becomes the substance of our being. Knowledge remains a burden in memory. That's the difference between the two. Understanding becomes the substance of our being and helps the growth. It brings about transformation. There is a trans-conceptual level of our being, a dimension of life. What happens in sleep consciousness can happen in the submission of meditation. Meditation implies a state of being where in waking hours one is living in that inner emptiness inner space uncluttered by the movement of thought, totally relaxed, but chemically and neurologically responding only when a response is warranted. Meditation is a state of being awake, alert, and yet the brain is absolutely quiet. It is not active. The mind is alert but does not react. The inner space is called emptiness. We have to use that word. There's an emptiness of space between you and me, but that emptiness is not void. It's full of energies. We cannot see or perhaps touch them with our senses, but that's a reflection on the limitation of our senses. It's not a reflection on the nature of those energies. They are there, right now inside the room, though we cannot see, feel, or touch them. In the same way, there is an inner space within us, like the space outside, where there are innumerable virgin energies, untapped, unconditioned, unexplored by man, undefined by verbalization. So, in order to find out, to investigate, to discover the nature of the transconceptual reality, to find out if there's anything like God, like the divine, it is necessary to let the mind go into abeyance while we are awake. All the concepts, the total human past, goes into abeyance, and the mind is completely denuded of all concepts, theories, and words to be in that state of denudation. The inner emptiness requires great energy. It is not a movement of the body towards some object, away from the body. It is not a movement of the mind, the I, towards something which it has not got. It is a voluntary winding up all the movements and to be in your being, just holding on there without moving in any direction whatsoever. The mysteries of life are uncovered in the emptiness of silence. We do not uncover them. The grace of life reveals them to us. Getting revealed is not the result of our actions. We feel that through our brain and mind, we can uncover any mystery. We can understand anything with the help of the mind and thought. This assertive intellect is an addiction, and we feel that with the intellect, the assertive intellect is an addiction, and we feel that which the intellect cannot grasp with the help of words does not exist. We thought that with the created measurements we have covered the wholeness of life, but with all the knowledge and experience of the total human race put together, they have covered a very small part of life. A person who is interested in finding out what is beyond the mind and thought, what is beyond the world of concepts and symbols, will have to learn to be in a state of non-action. That's the first and the last step to be taken by us, to be in a state of effortlessness, effortless spontaneity. Now we do not know. Nobody has educated us on those lines. So we begin self-education, or sadhana, as they call it in India. The definition of sadhana is interesting. It's a Sanskrit word. Where the word sadhana is used by the Upanishads, they say that it is not for gaining something which you have not, because there's nothing in the cosmos that the individual does not possess within himself. Then why is sadhana necessary? It's necessary to remove the obstacles in the path of realizing one's own nature. We have many encumberments around us. We have surrounded ourselves with so many things, physically, psychologically, with so much knowledge. It's an encumbrance around us. Sadhana is for removing those obstacles in the inward voyage. Meditation is going home. It's going back to the source of life and not going away from oneself. It is for removing the obstacles or unlearning the wrong things that we've been gathering, absorbing, assimilating, acquiring as we grew up. So the original pristine nature of the reality shines through us. It shines through the brain, the eyes, the speech. It radiates through the whole being. Sadhana is not for acquiring something. It is not very encouraging for the people when they come to learn that through sadhana there's nothing to be acquired. Everything to be understood as it is. Everything is to be understood as it is, and to enable ourselves to live in the light of that understanding which we carry in ourselves. We begin to learn. We have observed that the mind moves constantly, incessantly. In waking hours, when we see through our eyes or hear through our ears, we are reaching out towards objects. Sensation is brought towards the body. It is carried over to the brain. The brain interprets it according to its education. And then we react according to our conditionings. This is going on throughout the day, receiving, registering, recording, interpreting, evaluating, accepting, and rejecting, consciously and unconsciously. This process is going on. We watch and observe that the mind moves whether we want it to move or not. We observe the mind and see the terrific momentum of the mind. To have an intimate encounter with that terrific momentum is quite an event in life. Reading books on psychology does not create that encounter. We have to sit down and observe for ourselves. We observe the momentum, the upsurge of the emotions unrelated to each other, chaotic emotions, ambitions, and desires, dragging us in opposite directions simultaneously. The anarchy of ideas and the chaotic emotions. We see our inner factual being when we sit down and observe. So the education begins with observation. Unless there is an urge to discover what is beyond the mind and the brain, unless there is an urge to reach out towards the infinite, then we begin to observe. Observation is an attentiveness. It is a non-reactional attention. When we watch and observe and see some weakness, we get annoyed with ourselves because our image of ourselves is hurt and shattered by that encounter. We have an image about ourselves that we have transcended the sexual urge. We sit down to observe and we notice that it has not yet been resolved. The truth discovered in the moment of observation hurts the ego because the ego had been carrying an image of itself. And now that image is shattered, it gets damaged, and we don't like that. So the austerity of observation is lost, and we indulge in self pity, annoyance, and irritation. Unless there is the humility to learn and to discover, the ego will get hurt. And that's why we often come across individuals who say that they cannot simply observe. That austerity of being attentive, observing without reactions, is something we have never been educated for. It's a new thing for us. We've been educated to look with a motive and try to use what we observe for our purpose. We've been educated to look with a motive and try to use what we observe for our purpose, self-centered motivations, and then using the objective reality, the things, the persons, the situations, for our self-interest. That is what we are trained for. But now we are coming to our relationship with the totality of life. Life is not going to be a means to an end, nourishing our ego. The communion with life is the purpose. Realizing the nature of our relationship with the totality is the motivation. There is no other motivation. We learn to observe, and if we observe jealousy, we admit it, we see it. Observation requires humility. If there's pride and vanity, and we insist on carrying the images about ourselves that the parents had created, and we become dogmatic about our images and try to deny the truth revealed by observation, then we cannot proceed any further. But while observing, come what may, the inner factual aspect of our being is reflected in the mirror of silence, and we are pleased to learn about ourselves. Up to now we were ignorant. Now there's nothing that is not noticed by us. Observation has exposed ourselves to ourselves. We are the observer and the observed. If and when there is the urge to learn and discover the meaning of life, discovering if there is anything like God, when the passion is there, it has a depth and intensity to it. Everyone can have an intensity of energy, a passion and vitality when the leakages to the vital energy are taken care of. When you don't allow any leakages, any dissipation of unscientific wastage of energy, then every person has infinite energy at his or her disposal. The human being, condensed cosmos, is a mysterious being. We learn to observe, and that is to say, we can be with the given fact without emotionally reacting and getting entangled in those emotions. I read that line one more time. We learn to observe, and that is to say, we can be with the given fact without emotionally reacting and getting entangled in those reactions. We get so much entangled in our reactions, stimulated stimulated by the objective situation, that it gets pushed into the background. And we're busy with our reactions and can't get out of them and can't relate to the objective situation, can't relate to the objective person or the challenge. Observation enables us to have a distance between the object and ourselves. It creates a healthy space between the two, and we can be with the fact. Otherwise, we run away from the facts most of the time and try to create a make believe world and indulge in wishful thinking. When the observation becomes a normal way of living, then one is no more aware that one is observing. In the beginning, when one is learning, there is a division. I am observing myself. So we begin with that voluntary division of the I, a voluntary activity. When we have learned it, there is no more consciousness that we are observing. There is no more effort involved in it. Observation without the observer remains a dimension into which the person has grown. From the constant doer and the experiencer, from the constant acquiring, experiencing, evaluating, judging, etc., we have moved with our whole being into a new dimension of observation. The state of observation becomes normal, as now it has become normal for us to look and listen to each other effortlessly. I'll read it again. The state of observation becomes normal, as now it has become normal for us to look and listen to each other effortlessly. So as breathing is going on effortlessly, in the same way, observation goes on without the eye sitting as the center, making an effort and saying to itself, I am observing. The transformation takes place from one dimension into the other. It is not something mystical and mysterious in the reach of a chosen few. It is the birthright of every human being. In this state of observation, when it becomes a normal state, the division and the boundaries between the conscious, subconscious, and the unconscious, they fade away completely. In the moment of observation, we have seen what is contained in the subconscious, and we can and might have seen even the contents of the unconscious that also gets exposed. And if we have the deep and genuine interest, there is the humility not to get disturbed and upset by what we see, because what we see is already contained within us. How can we be afraid of ourselves? If that has happened, then a very important thing takes place in the life of the individual. Self-deception, carrying images about ourselves, comes to an end. In daily relationships, we have the burden of those images. We have to project that image as people are expecting that image of us. So we try to manipulate our behavior to suit the image that they had created about us. It's quite a burden. It exhausts people to pretend to be what they are not and to hide and conceal what they truly are. This is why relationships exhaust us. Otherwise, they should revitalize us. So that game of pretensions, hypocrisy, or being afraid of getting exposed to others is no more. One moves in that simplicity of one's being. The important thing, if it is allowed to happen in our lives, is the ending of this game of self-deception, hypocrisy, and pretension. Then the elegance of simplicity and the glow of that elegance permeates the being and the behavior. We have not yet come to the transconceptual world. We are on the threshold between the perceptual, conceptual, and the transconceptual, equipping ourselves because the transformation or the transcendence takes place instantaneously. Transcendence does not require time. Equipping ourselves for the happening requires time and education. The actual happening of it, the actual transformation, is something that happens instantaneously and is not the result of a particular action by the person. It is a happening that occurs when the equipment is ready, purified by a scientific approach to everything and every layer of our being. Then it will happen by itself. This is not of time, and it is not in time. It is unrelated to both, but it cannot occur unless the whole equipment of the body and the mind is prepared and educated for this to happen. Sadhana is a preparation for the occurrence of transformation, not for acquiring and achieving transformation. So, with this beautiful chapter, I wish you a great day. Bye for now.